The talk that we just heard, when we started to pull this thing together, a lot of those things that he was talking about are things that we're starting to think about. So right away when he said, what's your number one fear? Irrational fear, I guess. So we sat there and obviously I'll introduce myself and then I'll introduce the panelists next. My name's Jeff Drave. I work in the construction office for the Department of Transportation right here in Bismarck. So get to deal a lot with all of the issues with bidding and what you see up on the board behind you right there, which is things that I don't think anybody's been immune to over the last, well, it's 2+ years now, I guess, but since the dreaded word that nobody really talks about anymore, but the pandemic. So back to that. So our number one fear, irrational fear, and I'll show you some statistics here in a little bit, but our biggest fear now, when I show you those statistics, is a lot of these things we're going to talk about today. And it's stuff that happens that we have to deal with in our office in terms of, and they said, and Nick had said, what makes an irrational fear? Well, it's a lot of things that you don't understand. And I think that kind of encapsulated a lot of what we're going to talk about here today, because there's a lot of things that we can show you with graphs, and you can show things, and a lot of engineers and math people can look at it and say, well, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. It shouldn't go that way. Graphs usually don't go that way, and how do you project or how do you work off of things like that? So that's kind of our goal today, is we're gonna lay out some of the things, and we have a really good panel. We reached out to the AGC and we got Nancy Slotten from Border States Paving, who is our contract representative, and she's very knowledgeable, so we already visited a few times about this to kind of get a lead as to kind of a feel for what people wanted to talk about. So we visited with Nancy, and then Dale Schwindt from Rinker Materials, formerly Forterra, formerly Cretex, so sometimes it's hard to follow that, and Logan Beise from our programming division to kind of hit on the front end stuff. And again, myself is, I'll just kind of be taking a back seat to a lot of these guys' knowledge now, but I just kind of wanted to set the stage for what this conversation is about. And these two graphs, they're graphs that work together, but really show a lot of the things that we wanted to talk about. And back to that number one fear thing, when you look at our program, so a couple of years ago, or 2020, we had 402 million, 193 jobs, and we go to 2021, we have 362 million, 182 jobs, and then we see a jump, in 2022, we go up to 564 million. However, we did increase in jobs. You'll notice that we did 209 jobs that year. So a number that we wanted to look at was how much per job are we getting? Essentially bang for our buck. So I grayed out the 2023 data because it's not complete yet. We haven't bid out our whole program. So when you look at it, you say, all right, we've already bid out $435 million worth of work, and we've only did 71 jobs. And just a little tidbit is our program this year is going to be about the same size as it was last year. So if you look at it and you say 564 million, and we're already at 435 million, that doesn't leave a lot left to get that jobs number up. So it's a little inconclusive, so I didn't want to show it permanently, but these are the things that are our concern. Is you see, like, our jobs would usually hover right around 200 jobs a year. Funding has been escalating a little bit, but that's always kind of been a thing. Now you're seeing the amount of jobs we're able to do kind of dwindle and start to go down as the increase in cost. So we tried to encapsulate that in a graph just to show it to you. So in 2020 it was about 2.1 million a job, 2021 2, 2022 2.7, and then in 2023, which is this 435 over 71, 6.1. Now, right away when we looked at it in our office, we said, well, does that make a lot of sense? We actually bid the biggest job in the department's history here on the 4-laning project up by Watford City, which was $80 million. So, okay, you can do the math on that, take it out, and you have 70 jobs for 350 million. So instead of the 6.1 per job, it only goes down to 5.1. So still really alarming for us. So just some statistics that I wanted to share with you guys in terms of what we're looking at and why we're talking about this stuff, at least from our office's standpoint. One other slide I wanted to show you is one that is it's kind of one that we monitor really closely in our office because it's a pretty good barometer of how things are going out there in the world. And this is essentially just showing bidding competition for the last 6 years, including what we've seen so far this year, which has obviously been our lowest year in our last 6. It has a direct correlation, obviously, to the prices we get on things and our ability to actually bid a lot of work. Because it does become concerning for us when that bid number goes down. So a lot of these things will piggyback into our conversation today, which is discussing some of the challenges. So like our first slide said, we have funding, input costs, supply chains, all those things you see, and workforce issues. All of these things highly impactful on our panel here in terms of how they're able to do the work, essentially everything they think about now. So just to lay the groundwork, I just wanted to kind of discuss that a little bit. In terms of our very first topic, which was the funding issue, we have, essentially when we look at it, we think about funding and we have a huge program. I mean, when you look at our program relative to other years, it's really big. The problem we're seeing is everybody has a huge program. Our surrounding states, everybody, so we're essentially competing. And at the same time, it's kind of a dynamic type of way of funding now in terms of our past. And Logan from our programming office is gonna kind of walk us through a little bit of some of the things that he's dealing with funding.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I was asked to kind of give the funding perspective here, and I'll go over kind of the two main changes we've seen in the last few years in terms of funding. And the one is the passing of the IIJA transportation bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. You also hear it called BIL, Bill, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, but that was passed in November of 2021, and it's a transportation bill that'll give us funding from 22 to 26, so it's a 5-year bill, which is awesome. It's great to have that in place. Removes a lot of, I guess, guessing if we're gonna get funding and stuff like that. We got the bill in place, we know we're going forward. It's a 36% increase in funding versus the FAST Act, but a lot of that 36% increase goes to specific programs. It's not just, here's more money, go forth. I mean, every federal funding comes in apportionments that have their own specific rules, and you gotta find projects that fit them. But the big increase in funding we're seeing is in bridge funding. Nationwide, they're seeing, deterioration of bridges. It's something that they're really trying to hit to get our bridges back up to snuff here. So North Dakota will receive $45 million dedicated bridge funding every year of the IIJA, the transportation bill, from 22 to 26. So that's $45 million dedicated bridge funding each year, which is a big number. In addition to that, through the appropriations process, we've actually received another $19 million in 22 and again in 23. We can't guarantee it, but we expect it again for 24 and 25. So it's an additional $19 million dedicated just for bridges. We can't use it for anything else. So a huge increase in bridge funding. So you'll see more bridge projects out there. They're really hammering away on bridges. We got our engineers working hard trying to get those bridge plans out, and like we'll see the issues that it's causing. But IIJA also introduced some new apportionment categories, in 22. One of them is the PROTECT funding category, which is promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation, which is really just environmental protection, resiliency projects. So we've been using that funding on grade raises, maybe some scour stuff, and we're looking for ways to spend stuff to do that environmental resiliency stuff with that funding. That's about $9 million for that program. Another new program is the carbon reduction program. That is exactly what it is. We call it CRP, but it's projects that can reduce carbon. So we're using that funding for a lot of bike and ped projects. We've done LED conversion projects with that, and we're actually working on that plan right now to, if we get an approved plan by Federal Highway, we can expand what we can do. So we're trying to look at maybe some construction practices, maybe some material choices we can use, different materials we can use that might reduce carbon. So we'll use that funding. That's about $8 million, but that is 65% sub-allocated to our major cities or populations where they're seeing the congestion and stuff. And then the third new program is the NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. That is the charging stations. We're going to be putting those in on the interstate on I-29 and I-94 every 50 miles. We're getting that program rolling out, so you'll see more charging infrastructure, and those are DC fast chargers, level 3 chargers, every 50 miles once we get that program. That program is about $5 million a year, so it's a pretty decent sized program too. So and then also that 30% includes additional money for our normal programs that we've always had, a little bit of increases, but it's really, these new programs kind of took up a lot of that increased funding. The other big change we're seeing, kind of the number 2 big change I've seen in the last couple of years is the move toward discretionary funding, which is grants, application-based, competitive funding. We in North Dakota, we love our formula funds. You can plan for it, we know we're getting it, we can build our program out and we know how much money we're getting. Where with discretionary funding is application-based, you don't know if you're getting it until you get it. So it's a little bit difficult, but we know we have to compete with other states. We're seeing the trend go towards discretionary funding away from formula, which we don't want that, but we gotta react, and our grant team is working really hard putting out tons of grant applications to try to get some of this funding. We've actually applied for over $550 million of grant funding here in the last biennium, 21 to 23, and we were super successful. We received about $140 million in grants, and that's additional money on top of our regular formula funding. So that's just adding to that program where we see our trend lines going up on our programs, and a lot of that is to do with these grant dollars. And some of the big grants we received were the US 52 passing lanes from Carrington north to the border, where we're putting a passing lane in every few miles to give those passing opportunities. We also got a grant to install, do some grade raises across the state in kind of our low areas where we're having water encroach on the roadways. We got a grant to raise those up and maybe reduce the need for road closures and spring flooding. And then another one that we have is we call it the Tribal Safety Bundle. On the reservations, we did with that grant, we're doing some intersection improvements, some turn lanes, some roundabouts. It also includes the Highway 73 project, the second half of Highway 73, the major rehab, where we're adding some passing lanes and putting in a turn lane. I think that's being bid at the end of March here. You'll see that project be bid. But generally, you'll see that with the new IIJ, we got more money, and then we're really going hard after these grants, so that also brings in more money. But unlike, the oil boom years where we're the only state with money and we can draw in people to come and work for us, every state is experiencing this. Every state has money, so we're competing with every state for contractors, labor, consultants, materials. So it's a lot harder, so we're seeing those costs really, really increase. And then we gotta react to that. I guess I can kind of go into and kind of how we build our bid schedule. It kind of starts with our STIP, our Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. It's a 4-year program. It's every federal dollar we have spent on projects or programs has to be in the STIP. It's a 4-year document we update every year, but you can find it on the website. I encourage you to look at it. It's broken out by district, and you can find where you live, and you can see what projects are coming your way. But we build that STIP with a lot of people are involved in that. Mainly the districts do their district priorities, we call them their roadways. They prioritize their projects. Our local government division works with the cities and the counties, the MPOs, to really prioritize those. We meet with the tribes to kind of go over what our program looks like, what their programs look like, and try to match them up. But we look at, like I talked about the funding categories, we got to make sure we have enough projects in each funding category. We also look at roadway condition, pavement preservation. I'm a big proponent of that. I think we should spend all of our money on pavement preservation, and whatever we have left should go to other things, but it's not quite how it works. We also look at traffic, freight, we look at our state plans, look at our highway safety improvement program, and try to incorporate those projects. So we also look at statewide distribution. We got 8 districts, we got 8,500 miles, 4,800 bridges in 8 districts, and we got to spread that money around. Each district has their own contractors and consultants and engineers and people that need to work, so we got to ensure we got work spread across each district. And we also look at work type, and we try to spread the work out by work type. We got concrete projects, asphalt projects. We want to make sure that the industries get their portion. So we set up our 4-year STIP, and then sometime this summer I'm going to meet with the construction division, and we're going to go over our 2024 construction program. I'm going to bring a list of projects that have completion dates and projects we want to build in 2024. I'm going to meet with construction, and we're going to lay out how we're going to bid these out. And usually our larger projects we try to bid out early. Our projects with maybe some materials that require more acquisition time, light poles, signal poles, box culverts, things like that. We try to get those bid earlier. So I'll meet with them, we'll lay out our construction program, and then hopefully we can stick to it and start bidding. But like we saw this year, I build that construction program based on historic costs, the best estimates I can get. But as projects start coming in for authorizations and things like that, I see the engineers' estimates, and they get increased. So I'm seeing much larger engineers' estimates. So then I got to look at that project and see, can we do this project? Do we have enough money for it? And if we do it, what happens on the back end? Do I have to kick out some other projects? We got to kind of prioritize as we go along. When I see those engineers' estimates, when I see those bids come in high, I have to kick out projects out of bid openings later down the road. Another thing that can affect our bid schedule too is the appropriations process. I mentioned that we do have a transportation bill, which is awesome, but we have to go through the appropriations process every year, and that's where they actually give us the money. And depending on what's going on in Washington, that can stretch out. So they'll only give us maybe 1 or 2 months worth of funding for the year right away, and because our federal fiscal year is October 1 to September 30th. So if we don't get all of our money, we only have a short construction season. So we want all of our money right away so we can bid those projects immediately, or get all those projects bid out and then give people time to build them. If they only give us a few months of funding, we got to start pushing projects. We bid them later, it means more cost increases, things like that. And then, like I talked about, the lack of funding. Sometimes when we award a project over what we've planned, that means something in our program has to be kicked down the road. So I guess that's kind of an overview of funding and how we set the bid schedule.
Thanks, Logan. I have one question, but I'm going to save it for the input cost side for you. But so the same thing. Then in our office, we work with programming, and they program jobs, and a lot of times they get moved. We get a big program. The bid lettings kind of get juggled up. And I guess from the contracting side, what kind of impacts does a large value construction program that is being pushed in most all states with this huge dollars everywhere have on you guys in terms of, just how you approach something where it's almost unprecedented?
I guess the one thing I would say is when we had all the dollars and no one else did, there was obviously a lot more competition, and there's still plenty of competition out there, at least in the asphalt paving business. That is our major focus. But it definitely, it's the earlier that work can be bid is the better for us, because you're trying to plan in the winter. You need to do your scheduling, so you have to deal with trying to get equipment out there before the road, the load limits get on and things like that. And as the projects go, obviously some of the contractors are filling up, and the DOT has kind of started their practice of, they put the higher DBE goals in the earlier projects, and so then we're dealing with a lot of the DBEs kind of fill their capacity also, and it gets to be less people quoting overall as it rolls in later in the season, and it's just not as many people out there quoting the work, I would say, for us.
Sure, thanks. Dale, do you have?
I think it's the same thing on the supplier end. We've got such a high volume of work now coming to our company because we're the sole source in the company here in the state, and it really makes it difficult on our end to meet all the obligations to everybody. I always say that the sooner we can get a project bid, the better, because it allows us to plan and get our supplies sooner. There has been over the past couple of years, it's been more difficult to get supplies, but now things are catching up from COVID a little bit more, so it's easier for us to get our supplies, but we're still fighting the same battles as everybody, with staffing and everything else. So the sooner we can bid projects, the better. And as we get those on our books, we're planning things as we get them. We're trying to schedule our production side of things as we're getting projects. So the sooner we get them, the better off you are.
Yep. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Dale. I know when we first talked about this topic and it did come up, it's like, wow, the sooner we can bid projects, the better. And it's amazing all the things that are attached to them now when we try and bid projects early, and the amount of different things which aren't just funding attached, but as you can tell, a set of plans is pretty thick now with different entities weighing in on our ability to do that. But so the other challenge we wanted to move into though was one that is one of those that is really came up, and it's a lot of buzzwords and a lot of phrases that everybody's heard in the last year. I don't know if I had heard input costs and supply chains much, but I was hearing it daily and still do. But essentially, when we look at these things, that this is where when I talk about earlier, it's the things we don't understand from the department side in terms of some of these input cost issues and supply chain issues. So we do know that just from visiting with the contractors that there is a lot of volatility out there. And I guess I just kind of wanted to open this one up by, Dale or Nancy kind of starting us out and just your exposure with input costs, just and their impacts on how they affected you, both at the start of the pandemic, before that, just kind of maybe an overview of where we're at today.
Yeah, I guess I can start from the precast side of things. 2 years ago, we had a really difficult time getting supplies. We were seeing substantial price increases. Now they're down to a lot more reasonable price. On the steel end of things anyway, we are seeing, due to the high fuel costs nowadays, we're seeing higher costs in some materials. Our concrete materials have gone up about 10%. The trucking, now with the high fuel costs, becomes an issue as well, trying to get that incorporated into our product costs. Just in general, inflation over the past, almost on a yearly basis, is probably in that 10% range. Right now, the supply issue is a little bit easier to deal with. A couple years ago, we were out probably 8 to 10 weeks on getting our steel. Right now, as of last month, we're 4 to 5 weeks. So that's not going to be an issue. The issue is more on our side, on the labor force and everything else that goes with that.
I think on our side, obviously it was the oil and the fuel prices that had oil prices for the asphalt almost doubled in a year, and the prices were going up so rapidly. It used to be you had a little bit of time to get back to the supplier and let them know. And it was, if you got a job, you wanted to make sure you signed up your oil contract right away, because you wait 3 more days and the price probably went up another $20 a ton or something. So that side of it was real interesting. We probably have done more fuel contracting than we've ever done in the past, just because didn't know what was going to happen in the future. There is the fuel clause adjustment, but we just looked at some other things to try to cover ourselves that way. Trucking also for us, depending on projects, some projects have a lot of hauling to do on them, and finding the trucks that are willing to come to the projects and work for you the prices just kept going up, and again, that comes back down to the labor shortage, where a lot of the trucking firms can't find qualified people to put in the trucks either. Another thing that really hit us was the lack of availability of equipment, new equipment and purchasing equipment. What you used to be able to order in the fall and have by the construction season, you're now looking at, we'd get it in September, October, so you miss the whole season of the new piece of equipment. Or parts are very difficult, parts to get for equipment. Just didn't have them on hand. If a truck ended up in the shop somewhere to get a repair, it could often be down for 2-3 weeks while they waited for parts too. So I think, that part of it made a big difference on us. But, some of the oil and fuel, those prices are coming down. So that's a good thing to see. Equipment and parts, I guess, as we get into the season, we'll find out.
Thanks, Nancy. And this is where I was going to circle back with Logan. So with these volatile costs, like we show that graph right away where it shows things going crazy, how does that impact how you're able to schedule? And so you have a STIP, but that was, I know you're evaluating, but how do you approach something when it's so volatile like that?
Yeah, that's where we got to kind of be nimble and react, right? We start adjusting those historic costs to try to catch up. We adjust our program, like I was saying. I know the districts in here probably don't like me this year, because I've been calling them and saying I need to cut this project and this project, and it's a hard thing to do. And especially a lot of our projects are kind of set based on when they're ready. So we got a project ready, we bid it out. Is that the best project? I don't know, but it's ready. We got to bid something out now, and then so maybe later on we got a project we really wanted to do, but now we're out of money. So sometimes it can get kind of difficult, but we just got to be nimble and react. We adjust our STIP historic costs every year. We try to keep up, But obviously this year has been a completely different animal. Actually, the previous few years, I was calling the districts asking for more projects. I was their best friend. They liked it when I called them. But this year here, I've been calling and cutting.
Sure. Thanks, Logan. Maybe one follow-up question for Nancy and Dale is, so obviously when we see a graph like that and it shows us things that are happening out there that it's hard to quantify for us, when it comes to you guys, how do you approach it going forward? Is there a rational way you're able to do it, or in terms of, obviously we're going to have the same cost in terms of a program or more for the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, listening to Logan. How does that impact the way you're approaching it in terms of maybe how are you mitigating some of all these issues that are coming up? Or are you forecasting that maybe this will actually subside a little bit and maybe it won't be as prominent in terms of costing and all these different type of things that seem to be real prevalent today, and all everybody does is look at that graph and say, man, I don't know how to approach things going forward, especially sitting in our office, we're like, well, that can't go up, it can't continue to double, right? Well, listening this morning, he said, how do you know based on the past data? So is it one of those that, I guess, just be interested to get your take on that one?
I guess from my perspective, as everybody knows, we've been bought out a few different times here in the last 10 years, but it makes it difficult on my end and our local plant here to come up with reasons why we can't produce things as fast as people want them. I've been having discussions with our senior people in the company to try to get us to put up a building out there at the plant, or multiple buildings, to try to allow us to produce 12 months a year. And I haven't had much success in getting them to grab onto that yet. I'd like to work together with the DOT and consultants to try to come up with the volume of work that's coming up here and try to put some hard numbers together for them and send that their way and see if that will justify it enough for them to invest in that for us, because it'll help the whole state out. And it's been a real struggle to try to get them to understand that. I'm doing my best to try to push it as much as I can. But I think in reality that would help us out a lot. It would help the flow of the projects a lot more. As far as costs go, that's another fluid thing. With the new companies, they have different models and how they want to do things, and that's made it a little more difficult on our end. So it's hard for me to really give good solid estimates too, because it seems like that's kind of a volatile little part of the chain there too. But we're doing our best to try to accomplish as much as we can in the time frame we have.
Thanks, Dale.
I guess for us, really, it's, we don't have control really over the costs of the materials and things like that. So, it's just for us to be able to put them into our bids and cover things that way. Unfortunately, it raises the prices of the projects, but we kind of go at it that way. Probably one of the things that causes some of the most problems is trying to get wages increased enough to keep people in the industry. That I know we're going to move into labor here pretty quick, but that's another side of it, that's a cost that we would like to see sometimes, but we got to be on the fair level playing field with everyone. So I guess that's comments.
Sure, thanks, Nancy. And it's interesting because it's something that both sides are struggling with in terms of how that works. So the next topic that we wanted to talk about was workforce, which also is one that's hitting all industries pretty equally. As with the pandemic, the same thing, workforce became an issue and a real prominent issue for us at the department, and then it was really starting to show up when we started to visit with contractors in terms of a lot of projects where they just couldn't get labor, we couldn't get labor to go where we wanted to. So this was one that seemed pretty near and dear to Nancy and Dale's heart, as they've been, it seems like, really working pretty hard in this area over the last year in order to kind of do some things here to help alleviate that issue. But just just to kind of open it up, Nancy and Dale, how has the labor shortage impacted your business?
It's impacted us by, not being able to do as much work as we'd like. We don't have the employees that we need to fill all of the positions. Probably the biggest thing is you don't find qualified people anymore. It's you're hiring a lot of people that you need to do your own training with, and that makes a big difference. I will say this year for us, it's been a little bit better, but in the past, if you even got a couple applications, you'd be happy. Get a couple people to come and, say they want to come to work and no show. I mean, everybody is going through the same thing there, but that's, we've tried different places to advertise, and, everything is changing on how you find the people that you're looking for right now.
Yeah, and we're fighting that same battle. For instance, 2-3 years ago, we had 30 employees out at our plant, full-time employees. Last year, we were between 56 and 70 employees throughout the summer. And it was kind of a revolving door where, like Nancy said, you could hire somebody the day they're supposed to show up, they didn't show up. Or they're there for 2 or 3 days and then they don't show up anymore. So it makes it really difficult for us to plan things on the plant side of things and schedule enough work for everybody to do. And then on the other side of that, you get so many new employees that it takes the older experienced employees more time to explain to them how to do things. So it really affects the productivity a lot. And that's something we're trying to work toward getting away, we actually just finished a union negotiation where we were allowed to pay people a little bit more. We are a union plant, so we're kind of held a little bit hostage as a company as to what we can do with that, but we were allowed to grant a little more income for these people. So hopefully that opens up to more staffing this year. Like I said, our goal is to get up to 65 people this year. Right now we're at 38. We haven't opened up fully time this year yet, but we are struggling to get applicants just like everybody else. It's almost impossible sometimes to get people to apply no matter what the wage. So I think everybody can relate out there where we're at.
Well, that kind of leads me to another question. After visiting with Nancy and Dale, because they were talking about this one day, I added one question here, which was, how did the values of today's workforce, in terms of how have they caused you to change business versus maybe the values of employees, maybe like use the term your father's employees type thing?
Well, I'll start on that one, since when I read my bio, I saw that it said that I started working in the construction industry in the mid-'70s, and I really did, but I was really young then, I'll just give you that much. So I've seen a lot of it change, from going to pretty much all men out on the road to seeing more women out there with, people will bring their spouse out, and, that's how we continued to keep the crews going. And it's always been a real battle to get the younger people out there. But what we're seeing now is the Gen Y, Z, Xers, whatever they are out there, they just don't want to work the long hours. They're not interested in working construction and making a pile of money during the summers. They would rather work shorter days and have more time to themselves and spend time with family. So we're really taking a look at the amount of work that we're going to be doing and how we're going to try to shorten up those days, or, take Saturdays off or whatever it is, just to accommodate it so that we can have workers. Because if we don't start doing that, we're not going to be able to find anybody that will come and work for us. This is kind of the way we're feeling right now.
Yeah, and we're in the same situation. Like she said, people don't seem to want to work 8-9 hours or any more than that anymore. We used to be a company where you had a staff there, and their family members and friends would hear about where you worked and they'd want to be part of that. And then I think that's kind of going by the wayside a little bit more. So you're getting a lot more word of mouth type thing and however they find out about your company. But we are, due to that battle of people wanting to work, we are looking at probably doing some shift work at our plant just so we can work longer days and produce more than we have been able to the last 2-3 years. So that's something we're actively looking at here, and hopefully we can accommodate that and get more product out there to everybody.
Sure, you kind of piggybacked on my next question, so I'll ask it to Nancy. What ways have you used to recruit and retain workers with all these new values in mind?
That's really a good question. It's like Dale said, a lot of it is word of mouth. We've, turned pretty much completely to social media. At one time, used to use job service and be able to access them. Haven't been as successful with that at all. So, I still will keep it in the wheelhouse, but, really it's a lot of the different social medias and just trying, instead of probably just, posting a picture, or just an ad, you try to throw a picture in there, or, a lot of it though is just, it's word of mouth and trying to get the information out there and probably, telling more of what your wages are versus what you did before.
Sure, thanks, Nancy. So one follow-up question to end this slide. Have you partnered with any other entities to try and work on the labor issue? I know we had visited a little bit just in our preliminary about some of the technical colleges in North Dakota. That's one of the things through the AGC that we found out is that some of the colleges in North Dakota now are offering equipment operating degrees, and some of the other things aim more toward the trades. And I think overall you're seeing a little bit of shift from not telling every single person you have to do a 4-year college. It's, you're seeing a little bit more shift to the trades, which I think is great, and it's about time that they're doing it because, it's a good career in the construction industry too. Through the AGC also, we've been finding out about more programs through the state of North Dakota. I think that, I think the governor mentioned there's more programs out there to help get employees and keep the people in state. So I think that's part of it. The AGC also has the CLC group, which is Construction Leadership Council, and it's mainly all the young people in the organization, and they've done a great job of trying to get out into the schools and catch kids at a younger age. And I know they do like a demo days in the spring in Fargo, and they get some of the I think it's junior high and senior high kids out there to get them out to the construction site. And I guess you're just seeing more of that when in the past we didn't have to do that, or it wasn't done. I guess probably should have been, but it wasn't.
I guess on our side of things, we really don't, our type of work doesn't require a college education or, a trade education or anything. So we get a whole gamut of employees, not always the top of the echelon that you like to find, but we have gone to colleges trying to promote engineering help and stuff like that. But typically it's just, word of mouth and Facebook or whatever kind of social media we can get out there, and it's just a battle.
Sure. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Dale. So it's 12:01 right now, and we did keep 10 minutes for question and answers. So we can field a few questions, and I can walk around, or if we don't get any, obviously we can end the talk. So I think we just want to open it up now for any questions or comments that anybody had, and I'll come to you if I can see you. Sure.
Thank you. I work for a company that does the same type of work that Nancy does, and I agree with everything she said 100%. She did a very good job of articulating that. I also wanted to say that our whole industry, we've asked Congress for a long time, give us a big highway bill, our roads need it, our traveling public deserves it. And I almost feel like I have to apologize to the DOT and our agencies for how things have been going the last couple of years. Like, what's going on? I don't know why asphalt cement oil went to $1,000 a ton last year. I don't care what the reasons are that Portland cement was in shorter supply and there was delays, or underground materials or parts had to push jobs into the future year, or we didn't have enough bridge quotes. But I feel like our ego was writing checks that our body couldn't cash, and I sure hope. It feels like some things are about to get better this year, but it's just deeply disappointing with all this opportunity that you look at that graph, only 71 jobs. I know there's a lot of dynamics involved in that, but the whole industry, including my company, we got to do much better.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the panel?
So will the money alone bring the competition into the industry? Because 2.1 bids per job isn't going to get there with availability of either materials or paving companies or anything else. The costs go down when competition goes up. That's just a fact of life. So will that alone get us competition out there?
Any thoughts on that one?
It should.
I guess I missed the question. What was the question?
Yeah, Logan, will the money bring the competition?
Yeah, and I think we're already seeing that, right? Like last year, we're seeing kind of the bulk of it now, but as we have 5 years of this bill for the industry to ramp up, hopefully, and it should bring in that competition, I would hope. It seems like it's already, even with these last few bid openings, things have gotten better a little bit. I mean, the asphalt has gone down, obviously a big issue, but I think as we give more time for people to ramp up their operations, I mean, Dale was talking about ramping up his operations to increase the number of pipes they're putting out, so I think it just takes a little time.
Okay.
Thanks. Other questions or comments?
I'd just like to make a quick statement too, that I think we all as an industry need to work together to try to make this as efficient a system as we can. I know there's a lot of times where we kind of push and shove each other and try to come up with want dates and things like that, and know that everybody's doing their best to accommodate as much as possible.
Yep, appreciate that, Dale. So I guess that with no other comments, I wish we could all give Logan, Nancy, and Dale a round of applause for volunteering to sit here and talk about their experience. Thanks, guys.